anxiety, stress. We've all been there, we've all experienced it. When we understand what's actually happening in our bodies when we experience anxiety, because anxiety is a feeling, it's not a thought. You don't think you're anxious, you feel anxious. It is a physiological experience, and when we understand how that's happening in the body and what the jigsaw pieces are that make up that anxiety response, we're in a much better situation to be able to manage that anxiety. Have you ever had the experience where your body's in this kind of stress response, but your mind is going, well, this is silly. I don't know what I'm stressed about. There's nothing attacking me in my environment, but I'm still feeling this stress response. This is because the logical part of our brain really has no part in the anxiety experience. It is a felt sense. It is something that is happening in our biology. This is going to be the first video in a series I'm going to do on anxiety to really help you understand all the processes that are involved in the stress response, and then it helps make it seem more rational, and it also helps you to be able to preempt yourself getting into a state of anxiety. Typically, we get anxious and then we're looking for ways to switch it off. How about if we could get ahead of it and stop it even happening in the first place? This series of videos is going to help you go through that process and learn what are all the breadcrumb trail pieces that lead to that anxiety response, and how can we step in earlier and earlier to stop that runaway train happening. Now, we typically talk about that fight or flight response. The sympathetic nervous system is the branch of our nervous system that mediates that fight or flight response. This is a primitive system that's designed to help us either deal with a threat by fighting it. If you think in terms of a predator, a crazy bear coming at you, you've got two options. Either I'm going to have to stay and fight this thing, or if I've got a little bit of distance, maybe I can run away from it. That's what the system was designed to deal with. However, how many times a week in our modern world do we actually face a bear attack? Very few, I would argue. We're more likely to be being stressed by an email, another person, fearing a audition situation, a class situation with a teacher who kind of freaks you out. These are not what we call mortal threats, i.e. your life is not in danger. However, your nervous system doesn't really differentiate between a mortal threat and something like the teacher in the classroom, the audience going on stage, the email you just got from that particular person. Therefore, it often feels like we're having a disproportionate response to what's actually going on. And just like anything in the body, you know, as a dancer, to get better at something, we repeat it. We do class, we do the same exercise over and over. Tendus, battements, jumps. And the more you repeat it, the quicker and more efficient you get at it. The same thing applies to your nervous system in terms of the anxiety response. The more you go into the response, the better you get at it and the quicker you go into it. So it can become like that ball rolling down the hill, the snowball gathering momentum, and it starts to feel like a runaway train. We need to pull ourselves back and reprogram those responses so that we don't end up taking that course of action that's going to lead to the inevitable response of us being in a stressed heap on the floor. So the sympathetic nervous system, we shorten that to SNS, is the branch of the nervous system that mediates this response. Let's talk a little bit about how that works. It's part of a whole system that we call the alert cascade. There's an area of your brain, it's called the amygdala. It's basically like the body's smoke detector. It's out there looking for trouble. Is this a threat? Is there a bear coming towards me? Is there an aggressive person coming towards me? As it detects that threat, it's going to start to prepare the body to respond to that threat. Now, what we need to know about this, yes, the system was designed for some kind of external attack upon us, but really the system doesn't differentiate between that bear coming towards you and your own mind monkeys. You know, the guys that chatter in your head, not good enough, not good enough. Oh my God, what's going to happen tomorrow at that job interview? You know, the mental chatter that goes on. That also triggers our internal stress response. Again, the body doesn't differentiate whether the threat comes from outside or inside. We need to be very disciplined about our own internal narrative. How do you speak to yourself? And as dancers, you know, we're often not the kindest to ourselves. We're kind of entrained to just drive ourselves through quite an aggressive response. I got to push through it and I'm going to work through the pain and all that kind of language. You basically become your own predator and prey. And then again, it gets, the more you do it, the quicker and more efficient it gets, until all day long you've got this little mental chatter going on, driving this stress response. And it's exhausting. When we get the sense of that threat, the brain is going to initiate this stress response. And essentially, it's giving you those two options we talked about. Do I need to get out of Dodge really quickly? Or do I need to stay and defend my position? And whichever of those we're choosing, we need some biological responses online to help us deal with that. Let's take a look. This is the sympathetic response, all the things that happen, or some of the things that happen in our bodies once that sympathetic response has been triggered. So your amygdala's gone, ooh, threat in the environment. Houston, we got a problem. I'm going to send a signal via that sympathetic nervous system, and all these things are going to happen as a result. Your muscles are going to tighten. I mentioned earlier how being stressed can increase your injury risk. Your muscles are tightening because your body is preparing to either fight or run. So you're getting all this energy going to the muscles. Therefore, if you are used to having a certain degree of flexibility, elasticity in your muscles, when you're in the stress response, you got a little less. So now if you go to whack that leg up in a kick up to your ear, suddenly that hamstring's not as forgiving because we're in a stress response and everything's tightened up. Okay, now we're starting to see those connections. Going around to the next one, around the clock, your senses are heightened. If you're about to be attacked by a predator, you need to see more clearly, hear, taste, smell. If you see an animal when it's in a stress response, you see the eyes are dilated, the ears are pricked up, right? Everything's on high alert. Pain is another sense in the body. Therefore, have you ever had that experience? You've got an old injury, thought you dealt with it, it's gone out of your perception, and then you're in a really stressed state one day, and suddenly you're like, why have I got that old lower back thing again? Why is my knee hurting? I thought that had gone away. Your pain perception has been dialed up because it's the body trying to help you deal with this threat. So things that are often kept below the surface of your pain perception suddenly become more amplified. It's like the volume's gone up. Go and watch my videos on pain and you'll understand that pain is not just about something that's damaged. It's also dialed in to our level of what we call arousal or perception, senses heightened. Your breath pattern is going to change. In that stress response, we typically go into that high chest breathing pattern. The breath gets more rapid. We're sort of more in that panting rhythm. And again, that means we've got less oxygen coming into the body. Remember, your muscles are operating on oxygen. So if you're dancing, you're finding that you're not getting oxygen delivery as quickly. You're going to fatigue more quickly. Fatigue is related to injury. Again, it's all reciprocal. digestion is inhibited. I'm going to do a whole video on digestion because how many dancers have digestive issues? When you are about to get attacked by a predator, your body doesn't really care if you've digested your lunch if you're about to become lunch for that predator. Therefore, it's going to switch digestion off. Digestion takes a lot of our energy reserves in the body. There are lots of systems in the body that are all kind of draining our battery life, a bit like a phone or a laptop. When you're going into stress mode, your body wants to switch off anything that's draining excess energy so that all your available energy can be diverted towards dealing with this threat, right? Doesn't matter if digestion is working, priority is deal with threat first. That's why when we're stressed, we can often feel nauseous and get kind of, feeling a little sick or feeling like you need to run to the bathroom. The body switches digestion off and it often wants to just clear everything out of that system so that you're lighter and more able to deal with the threat. Go and check out the digestion video if you want to know more about that. Your heart rate's going to go up, which means your blood pressure also increases. You get that kind of racing heartbeat, right? When you're in a stressed response, we're pumping more blood around the system. But again, it means we're going to be fatiguing more quickly. All these things are exhausting. They're not conducive to health. There's another thing that's also really key to us as dancers. We're going to produce inflammation. Inflammation is part of our defense system. If you think about when you cut your skin, you've got a breach in your defenses. What do you get? An inflammatory response. It's there to heal the wound up. Go and watch the video on inflammation to find out it is actually your friend, not your enemy. But if you're producing inflammation because your body is about to get attacked, it's preparing itself for a potential open wound. What if that bear cuts you with its claws? You're going to need to heal that up. Inflammation is part of that healing response. So you produce inflammation in that stress response in case it's needed. If you're not about to be attacked by a bear, it's not that useful. It's going to light up your digestive system with inflammation. Any of those old injuries we mentioned before, the inflammation goes up. So suddenly everything is louder in your body than it was before. Let's go back to efficiency. I'm always on an efficiency drive in the body. Let's not do all these things when we're not being attacked by the bear and we're just sitting doing our emails on our laptop. Let's look at the other side of that system. So we looked at the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. There's a balancing system to this known as the parasympathetic nervous system, and we call it the rest and digest system because it's the state of your nervous system that you need to be in when you're resting, when you're repairing. So all that tissue damage that we incur as dancers needs to get repaired. It can only happen in this parasympathetic nervous state. And digest. Clue there, right? We talked about the sympathetic state, digestion is offline. Parasympathetic state, digestion is online. How many people have digestive issues and they tell me all the things, I had the perfect diet, it's all organic and I don't eat inflammatory things and it's all wonderful, but I still have digestive problems. If you are eating when your digestive system is offline, anything that comes in is just going to sit and it's not going to get processed, it's not going to be absorbed. So A, you're not getting the benefits of it, and B, it's going to, just like if you leave food out on a countertop for a few days, it's going to start to decompose and ferment, releases gases and leads to bloating, distension, discomfort and inflammation, right? So we need to make sure when we're eating that we are in this parasympathetic state. Eating on the run, my dancer friends, not a good idea. Go and watch the digestion video to find out more about that. Let's look at what's happening then in that parasympathetic response. So the threat has gone away and now we're in safety. This should be our default state, not the other one. Let's see what happens here. It's pretty much the reverse of what we just looked at in the sympathetic state. Those muscles are going to relax. We have our elasticity and flexibility back. Growth and repair are activated. Every day you dance, there's damage being incurred. Not necessarily a bad thing. That's how we kind of improve strength and things. We have to kind of break things and regrow them to improve our strength. But we need some repair time. We need that downtime so that the body can go and do this cleanup work, do all the maintenance work in the body. If you're not getting that time, then you're carrying today's damage into tomorrow, into the next day, and then it compounds until suddenly you've got an injury. Again, now you're seeing how your emotional state will affect your physical experience as well and your risk of injury. Growth and repair typically are happening in the deep phases of sleep. If you're not dropping into that deep sleep state, you're not getting the repair going on. If you are stressed, your body won't let you go into deep sleep because it needs to keep you alert. So if you're going to bed with your mind monkeys chattering, going, oh my God, I've got that audition tomorrow, and right? Then your body's going to go, still a threat, don't go into deep sleep. When you go into deep sleep, you're in paralysis. You actually get paralyzed, which is why we don't act out our dreams. Your body will not allow you to be paralyzed if you are not safe. I'm going to do a whole video on sleep, and you can see some tools that you can use to make sure you're getting into this parasympathetic response. Regular breathing is restored. We get out of that panting high chest breathing and go back into regular breathing patterns. That inflammation can get calmed down. We're going to douse the flames. Digestion gets switched on. We can receive and absorb the food we're eating. That heart rate and blood pressure are going to come down. Everything's going to settle in the body. This should be where you hang out. And we only go into that stress response when it is necessary, okay? Not just because our mind monkeys are having a little tantrum in our heads. While I'm talking about stress and anxiety being a bad thing, it's not always a bad thing. The stress response is also attached to joy. And when I'm working with people who have anxiety and they come to me and say, I want you to get rid of my anxiety, my first thing is, no, you don't. If you get rid of your ability to be anxious, number one, you're not going to have that online when you need it. If you step out in traffic and a car comes out of nowhere, you need that system online to make you respond. But similarly, it's also going to reduce your capacity to experience joy and happiness. Think about it. We've just talked about some of the symptoms of distress, right? When we're feeling anxious. Think about something that you're really excited about. Say you're about to see your best friend, you haven't seen them for a year because they've been away traveling, and you're really excited to see them. You actually get like butterflies in your stomach. You get short, rapid chest breathing. Your heart rate goes up a bit. Weren't those the same symptoms as that sympathetic response? Because it is a sympathetic response. We're actually using exactly the same mechanism to experience excitement and joy and happiness that we used for the anxiety response. The difference is the emotional context dictates some of the more detrimental chemicals that are released in that stress state don't get released in the happiness state. So there's not such a physiological payoff when we're in that happy state. In fact, we produce chemicals and hormones that make us feel better. So stress is not one thing. It is a spectrum of experiences, and our body is just responding in slightly different flavors, if you like, depending on the context of the situation. So stress is all about context. There are actually two words to describe stress. Distress is the one we've just talked about, the anxiety response. Eustress, stress, is the same as euphoria, right? It's actually that happy state. Some people in performance as dancers don't actually have performance anxiety, but they still get really excited to go on stage, right? But you're getting the same sort of symptoms. Sometimes we need to manage those as well so they're not too overwhelming if you're about to go on stage and you need to be in control of what you're doing. And this graph here on the screen is showing you we can be kind of like bored and nothing's going on. Then we can get into like healthy tension, right? Yes, I'm going into class and I'm going to focus on this today. And then you can be in that joy expression of, yay, I'm really motivated to do my class today or my performance. Then there's sort of a peak of that. And then we can start to tip into that more exhausted and distressed state. And then we can get into that sort of anxiety cycle. And eventually, if we hang out there too long, we can go into burnout. And I'll do a whole video on burnout as well. So we need to know where we are on these peaks and curves to be able to know which tools to use to get us back into that parasympathetic state, that neutral rest and digest state. We need to find the extremes to know where the middle is. This series of videos is going to help you learn how to discern these things in a more granular way. But here we're just getting the bigger picture of what's going on in this stress state and the different flavors of stress that are going on. All right, what can we do about it? That's the big question. Now, I'm giving you here two different breathing techniques. This is just sort of entry level, just to sort of help you at the beginning stages of learning about anxiety. What are some quick and easy things I can do to help manage this? And then in future videos, we'll get into more the reprogramming and restructuring of the nervous system. What if you want to get into that parasympathetic state? You want to go to sleep at night. You want to get your digestive system online to receive the beautiful meal you've just created for yourself, and you want to get the benefit of it rather than have it go into fermentation. This is the technique you want to use for that. I'm going to give you in a moment a separate technique that is when you need to be a little more relaxed, but you still need to be focused. This is about, I need to check out and chill out. You wouldn't want to do this before you go into a class. You wouldn't want to do this before you go onto stage. You don't want to be in a coma when you go on stage, right? You need to be alert. This is for when you want to just check out, end of the day, get to sleep, and generally just turn the volume down on everything in the body. Now, the first thing we need to do before we start this, and something that dancers are not very good at, how we breathe, okay? How we breathe is as important as the strategy of breath that we use. As dancers, we have this tendency to suck our bellies in, right? We're trained from a young age, pull your stomach in, pull your stomach in, pull your stomach in. That's not really conducive to taking a good, deep breath. If you just try it, suck your belly button to your spine like you do in ballet class, try and take a really deep breath. You find you meet a lot of resistance. It's like you hit a brick wall. Now let that abdomen relax, let those abdominal muscles release. Take a deep breath and allow the abdomen to expand, the abdominal wall to just inflate as you breathe in. And you get a much juicier breath. If you're finding that difficult, lie on your front so that you've got something against your stomach. The floor is in contact with your abdomen. And take a breath so that your abdomen pushes the ground away, and you'll find that your lower back rises up and down. We want the chest to be still, so we're not breathing in the high chest region, but we want the belly to expand. When you look at a baby breathing, what moves? It's the abdomen, the belly, right? It's not the chest. That's our default breathing state. We really need to get back into that as dancers because a lot of us find that tricky. The breath you take is allowing that abdomen to expand. When you time your breath, you want your exhale, your out breath, to be twice as long as your in breath. So if you breathe in to the count of 2, you breathe out to the count of 4. If you breathe in for 3, you breathe out for 6. Exhaling takes us into that parasympathetic state. So we want that breath to be longer in that phase than in the in-breath phase. Think about it. A deep sigh. It relaxes you, right? This is a physiological change that happens in the body when we exhale. So a shorter inhale, a longer exhale. That's a quick and easy thing to do. Just a few rounds of breath where your exhale is twice as long as your inhale, allowing that abdomen to expand as you breathe in. Great before eating to prepare your system to digest. Great before sleeping, and when you're super stressed and you just want to chill out. Now we're going to look at a different technique for when you want to turn the volume dial on the stress, but you need to be on your game. You've got to go into class, you've got to go on stage, you've got to go into that job interview, whatever it might be. We need to be in something we call coherence. So you're not like checked out, you are alert, you are present, but you're not stressed. Okay, calm but alert. Very similar with our breath. We still want to allow that abdomen to expand as we breathe. But this time we actually want to focus the attention of the breath around the heart area. Imagine you're breathing in and the air is going right into your heart and filling your heart. Our emotions are very much a part of that stress response. When we focus on our heart, we're typically in quite an open place. To be open means you reduce that stress response. So the emotions you're choosing as you do these techniques are very important. So on this one, we're going to focus on that breath coming into the heart area. You can even imagine that you've got nostrils, like in your nose, right over your heart, and you breathe that air right in. The difference with this sequence is your inhale is going to be the same length as your exhale. Let's say, for instance, you breathe in for 5 seconds, you breathe out for 5 seconds. So we're keeping ourselves equal. We're not dropping too much into that rest and digest state because we need to get on our game. But you can do whatever rhythm is comfortable. Just make sure your inhale is equal length to your exhale. If you do 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, and you repeat that 6 times, it lasts a minute, and we call that the 1 minute coherence technique. If you're about to go on stage, you're in the wings, do your 1 minute coherence, walk into the light. As you do that inhale, you want to focus on bringing in a regenerative feeling. Emotions carry frequency, they change our physiology. As you breathe in, think about something you're really grateful for. The frequency of gratitude is really high resonance. Inhale some sort of appreciative feeling. Then as you exhale, share that into the world. Everything in the world is reciprocal. Things come in, they go out. So let's bring in something high frequency, some sort of gratitude, appreciation, and then share it with the world. What are you doing on stage? You're sharing a frequency with the audience. This is a great technique to practice that reciprocal mechanism of exchange that you can then carry into your dance performance. And you are therefore sharing a high vibrational frequency with anyone who is watching what you're doing. So that's the technique to use if you want to be out of a stress state, but alert and ready for performance. All right. That was just a quick introduction to some of the underlying mechanisms that drive the anxiety response. Keep following the videos in this series and we'll get into more detail and give you more and more tools that you can use to get ahead of that runaway train.